And we're back. Welcome back, everyone. Anthony here. Hope you had a great summer. Really can't believe it's over. I am officially a suburban dad now. We left New York City, and so far so good. Definitely smells better out here, I gotta say. Miss the city, but enjoying the space, and I think my daughter's enjoying it as well. But we're here with season 2, and we're trying to spice things up a little bit for you guys, give you some more fun options and some more fun content. So we're going to do some movie rewatches. We're going to break down some movies and just have some fun talking about them and the parenting decisions and the family dynamics in them. So this week, we're breaking down Mr. Mom. If you haven't seen it yet, highly recommend it. I'm joined this week by Christine Landis, founder of Peacock Parent. So let me know what you think about this new format. If you want to hear more of these, if you're enjoying them, I want to hear from you. successfulworkingparents@gmail.com. Let me know. I'm Anthony Franzese. This is Successful Working Parents Podcast, and let's start the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents Podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. The name is still the same in year 2, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today is Christine. We're going to be talking about the 1983 hit, Mr. Mom. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'd love for you to just quickly introduce yourself before we dive into the movie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Landis. I'm a former CEO and current founder of Peacock Parent, which is devoted to anyone who wants to be buying back time in their life and really evaluating what brings them joy, especially in parenthood, and really how to balance that kind of time is money principle that we apply in business, but yet we don't quite do it in our homes.
Awesome. Well, I reached out to you about discussing a movie with some parenting elements. You had suggested Mr. Mom. Do you have a relationship with this movie? Where did that suggestion come from?
Mr. Mom, I remember watching it as a kid and I loved it. I also was like big Tom Hanks fan, big Michael Keaton. Like they were just, John Candy. I just grew up with that whole world. And so, but I do remember, I think even my parents loving it. So I feel like I watched it more than once, but yet, that hadn't happened in 30 plus years at this point. So it was really fun to kind of refresh.
Yeah. And I got to say, I actually had never seen it before. And I thought it was, I'm a big Michael Keaton fan as well. And so I enjoyed it. I watched it with my wife. I think you watched it with your family as well, right?
I did. It's funny. My kids, we do like Screen Time Sunday, and they'd asked my husband, they were like, well, what's this movie about? And they're 3 and 5. So I actually really didn't know if it was good. They were going to be able to pay attention the whole time or even be into it, but they did. But my husband was like trying to explain to them like, well, daddies weren't always as helpful as they are now. And,
oh my God.
And he was like literally trying to figure out how to say it to them. And it was really cracked me up. He's like, they didn't always help with, like meals and bath time and like putting kids to bed. And my mom or my son that's 5 was like, oh, was the mom too busy? And like, I was like, let's just start the movie. Like, I was like, let the movie explain it.
I know. I mean, we'll get into it. I mean, this is like, it's almost like offensive, really, to kind of some of the tropes in this. But yeah, it was really interesting to watch with my wife and just talk about the difference in dynamics today. But so basically the movie starts off, we have Jack and Caroline have a pretty standard suburban family life. It's certainly for the 80s. It's like the early 80s recession in Detroit as well. And he gets picked up in a carpool to work. We're already kind of learning maybe that money's a little tight because there's some carpooling happening. Also Christopher Lloyd,
I know,
the doc from Back to the Future, like looked a lot different.
Oh yeah, and the guy from Arrested Development, the dad in Arrested Development. I love
Jeffrey
that
Tambor
cameo
as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they go to work, and turns out they're getting laid off. They're actually getting furloughed, which the word furlough also made a comeback in 2020 during COVID. So I hadn't heard that word until COVID actually. But they get furloughed, and so now they have to decide what to do. What to do, and this is also like so real right now, right? With people getting laid off and trying to figure out how to find another job, and I guess the first sort of difference between now and then was that Jack finds it laughable that Caroline wants to re-enter the workforce.
I know, and that's. I mean, I'm almost skipping ahead to the end here, but it's like they left us in a place where both of them are going to be going back to work as 2 successful working parents. And it made me wonder about wait, that's kind of our intro into the world we're in now,
Yeah.
where it's like more standard that you have two working parents. And to your point, it's like it's actually abnormal now to have, I think, a stay-at-home parent. I don't have
Mhm.
exact statistics on it, but I feel like these days with the cost of living and just even the desires we all have, the goals of savings, all of the things, like it's just not as common to have someone stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, we'll get to that, but yeah, it's almost like 35 years early, like what we're now doing. But yeah, so he scoffs at it. Like how, I can't believe you think he makes a bet, like gives you like 100 to 1 odds,
Mhm.
sort of like, a little offensive.
Oh,
There-
super offensive.
Yeah. There was no montage for a job search. That was clearly teed up to be like him getting rejected by like 100 interviews that don't go well, but they don't do that. The next scene is that she's the one that gets the job,
Mhm.
right? So now we've basically set the premise of the movie. Mom's going back to work, and he's not like a huge dick about it. Like he's happy for her. He wants her to take the money, and she goes to work, and he starts being Mr. Mom, right? So we're kind of off to the races. Now the first thing that jumps out to me as your husband was pointing out to your kids, this guy's got nothing. He can't even, he doesn't know how to drop off the kids at school. Like, I mean, at this day in 2024, like if the father's never once done the drop off, like I think that's pretty shocking.
Agree. And I found myself almost annoyed that it's a household management movie at the end of the day. It's they'd
Mhm.
say like, I need to get back to running my household. And I love that they use those words, but yet some of the logistics they didn't actually go into detail about. It's like they show him grocery shopping and how, he can't even pick out a grapefruit without everything falling down. And I know it's a comedy and I know it's meant to be funny, but it's like, what about the meal planning? Like how did he source the recipe? Where did he know to even go do that? And like to your point, it's like we couldn't even do a basic drop off in this scenario. So like it's almost unimaginable to me how little he was involved. Again in this movie,
Yeah.
where I even noticed Anthony the opening scene when the day he gets laid off, the mom woke up early. She's, washing her face, tidying up, like doing laundry. She wakes the kids up. She even wakes her husband, Michael Keaton, up like he's another child. Like
Right.
instead of him having his own alarm clock or just being up to be helpful, waking the kids up. And then when he comes downstairs, he's all dressed and ready to go. There's not a single kiss goodbye to the kids. There's no like warmth or hug. And then he gets in his car and he's like immediately like, oh God, that was so draining. Like, that was so much that was expected of
Yeah.
me. It was
Yeah.
so,
That
it
was
was
strange. Yeah.
shocking.
He's saying he's so exhausted, but like he's telling the wife he slept great. I don't really, I guess I don't know what he was trying to do there. But the drop off thing is one thing because assumedly, you could assume he never had kids before, but to not know how to navigate a grocery store, like that, you don't need to have kids to like. First of all, there's not a single man in the grocery store, and then he doesn't know how to get like deli meat. I mean, how did he feed himself before he had kids, right?
Right. And it just even goes more so of like that housewife, role that I think so many women were expected to fill that I to your point, in the 50s, I think it was more normal that like you wouldn't see a man in the grocery store, but you would think by the 80s that was more standard, that at least maybe not 50-50, but like, that they knew how to go to the grocery store. My father took me to the grocery store sometimes, to
Right,
pick things up.
right.
And same thing with the laundry. He has no idea what laundry detergent to use. And of course, the whole thing practically explodes because he pours a combination of like 5 different elixirs of like laundry detergent in there.
Yeah,
And I keep going back to like, I know it's meant to be laughable, but to your point, the writers of this didn't come up with this stuff out of the blue. It's like there had to
right.
be some people in that room that actually either knew someone or had experienced these things close enough to be realistic to put into a movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a fantasy, right? It's like it's based on like I think what we assumed to be real tropes at the time. So meanwhile, Caroline's kind of crushing it, right? She quickly, so she also somewhat, fantastically, she rises the ranks like pretty immediately after being out of the workforce for a while. She's essentially like in the limos and the private jets like pretty quickly,
Yeah.
which that was cool, but also it was like of note that she's just like a high powered exec all of a sudden. Now, smoking cigs in an office. You're from California. I don't know if you even like. That must have been like a shocking thing for you to see. But in New York City, I remember like that was a thing, and I kind of caught the tail end of it. And when I started working,
Yeah, no, that was the most 1980s thing, that I saw besides, of course, the phone with the cord, but, it was in when I grew up, there was smoking and non-smoking sections in California in our
Mhm.
restaurants,
Yeah,
and my parents always chose the non-smoking, but still, I mean, now, again, knowing that you're in the same closed space and there was technically, like, a side of the room that you were supposed to sit on is also just kinda comical, but yeah, like, walking into that boardroom, having it just be covered and smothered in smoke is just bananas, like, that just I never experienced that obviously in my working career. Um, and even I don't know, just as a woman, I also caught on to the fact that she, some things just don't change where the first day of work, she's, nervous about what she's wearing and she wanna looks the part and how I think as women, we are really worried about the first impressions we make. And that still is something that's on our mind. It's a load that we carry that again, I don't think a man is worried about what suit he's going to wear that day, kind of
yeah,
thing, or what tie he's putting on.
yeah,
So there's some of that just I kind of went, oh, that's the same.
yeah. And she did. I did like that. Essentially, they turn her experience as a stay-at-home mom into like her superpower, right? Where she's able to relate to wives more. Again, all the other wives but her are home, right? So she it can relate to all of them a lot more. And I feel like that's another thing that you're seeing now. A lot of people are making the case for why we should make the workplace more accommodating to parents and to mothers specifically because mothers bring a lot of value to the workforce. And I feel like that was like a really early. I mean, this movie was ahead of its time in a lot of ways, you know.
Right. Even the remote work at the very again,
Oh, I
I'm
know. I
jumping
couldn't.
ahead,
I
but at
know.
the very
Yeah.
end when they're
Yeah.
negotiating that she can work 3 days at home and 2 days in office, and I was like, "Oh, wow, like that's, new age for the 80s." Like I didn't think that was much of a thing, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Spoiler, but yeah, I couldn't believe that. That was like that was like my biggest note from the whole thing was the work from home premise at the end. Okay, so she's killing it. He's having a hard time, and then they also set up this whole like the boss is hitting on her, and her friend Joan is hitting on him, and so you know that that's just gonna play out later in the whole thing.
yeah, that was one of my like what's when I thought about like what aged well or didn't, the relationship with the boss had so much like Harvey Weinstein, like Me Too movement, like vibes to it of just, him eventually trying to get into her hotel room. They're on
Yeah,
a work trip together and he asked her to get dinner. She politely declines and says, no, I'm just going to take a bath. Like, and he lets himself into her hotel room with the room service guy that he has apparently talked into saying that this is okay to do.
yeah,
And that, he starts saying like when she's telling him, no, get out of here. You've obviously had too much to drink. I mean, even her reaction, I was like appalled by. I was like, oh my God, I would have called 911 practically, like,
yeah,
and she's more like, get out, like so nice. And he's sitting there being like, oh, you're so adorable when you're angry. And oh, you're playing hard to get. And just all of that it played into this like cat and mouse kind of game.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
that
the thing. Like he's not painted like bad enough, right? I
yeah,
think that's a sign of the times is that, again at the end, like she's considering still working for him.
yeah,
She doesn't want to work there anymore because she misses her family, not because she was like sexually assaulted by this guy.
exactly,
Like,
exactly. And like that was just like that was a scene. It was like not even a big deal,
yeah,
besides that Michael Keaton, his character calls and in the middle of it, he answers the phone and he's kind of like, wait a minute. And, sure, he's pissed, but again, more at his wife, less even at the situation or the
yeah,
boss or just even that, oh God, is she okay? Or why would this man be in our hotel room? But then the other, you mentioned her superpower of being a mom and being able to, pitch this advertising or she worked for this advertising agency and she pitches this account that was selling tuna at the time. And did you hear that line from the tuna boss that he was saying, gosh, where have you been hiding this little girl?
yeah. I did
That
hear that. Yeah,
I mean, another one where I just went like, oh my God, like it just cringeworthy.
yeah,
I mean, I get upset if someone calls me Christina,
right,
and I'll correct them right away and go, "Oh no, it's Christine."
yeah,
And I just can't imagine being in that room and having that said to me in today's world.
yeah. I mean, I thought that was one of the more crazy parts of it for sure. So we have this big scene where it's kind of like the climax of incompetence where he's at home. First of all, you have three different types of maintenance workers showing up at the same time. You also have the baby in the walker. They don't make those anymore. I was told that when I was a child, I tumbled down the stairs and miraculously was fine. But that's why I believe they stopped making it so like a 18-month-old can't just walk on their own around the house. And I think that my only issue, not my only issue, but a big issue is I feel like the kids don't have enough. Like they're really more like props to show like his incompetence, right? They don't really like develop too much. Like they're kind of just like coming and going. It's not really clear how well he's taking care of them. They're sort of raising themselves, even though they're like three, five, and a baby.
Right.
But this scene kind of shows that he's really unable to take care of the house or the kids. You have all three maintenance people in the house at the same time. It's just like this total chaos.
Yeah. It's like it's not just even household management, it's like time management and then I guess parenting at large that he's just truly incapable of. Like,
Yeah.
he leaves the one kid in the shopping cart at the grocery store to go grab something else and just leaves them alone, which no one would ever do now.
Right.
And again, like this, this kid is sitting there by himself in the living room for a while he's walking around with these vendors. But I agree, like it kind of hit on, I think, my comment earlier of just some of the logistics of the home management I mentioned, like even those vendors, like who scheduled them? Like,
Right.
assuming the mom did Caroline's character, but how do they do that? Do they sit down? Does she have a list? Does she have like a, like how does she remember to do all those things and notice? But then even to your point about the kids and the relationship, they just they didn't capture all of the emotional and like again time requirement to take care of these kids, for being a movie about being a parent.
Yeah.
They made it seem like it was oddly easy, that the things you needed to do were pretty basic. Like you just need to make sure they get up and that you get in, they didn't even show them getting dressed, but like, drop them off at school and make sure they're fed. And that
Yeah.
makes it almost seem doable, oddly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, they didn't show like the reprieve during nap time, like
Yeah.
there wasn't they didn't really he had a harder time just like with the domestic duties more so than with the actual parenting because he wasn't really doing a lot of parenting. I mean, he makes his child get rid of his blanket when the kid's like 3.5. I feel like that he let him have it for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, that one, like, I think that was actually meant to show that he was trying to be a good parent,
Yeah,
and
because they
I
highlighted it
see that
later.
they were
Yeah,
trying to do that, but,
yeah,
yeah, it was it's it's also, I think, just I'm, a child of the '80s myself where there was so much, like, glossed over in these movies that we were raised in, so I
yeah,
think, your perception of how you think things work, I very much was taught a lot based on what I watched in life, and so just not really going into like I get it that it's not a documentary, but like not going into some of the nitty-gritty of really how this stuff works. Like
yeah,
there was a scene for dinner where she's working at this point, he comes home, um they're both at the dinner table with the kids at first, but then the scene just cuts to them finishing up with a glass of wine and hanging out and talking about the day, but like there wasn't like they didn't show like, oh, you got to go put the kids to bed. They're going to be annoyed you're putting them to bed. You have to get them in a bath. You have to get them dressed. You have to do bedtime books. Like, and I know that that's not entertaining for anybody in reality, but like as a parent, I guess like watching something that's supposed to represent parenthood, I'm like, man, you're like missing a lot of these like key features.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think they could have highlighted some of that stuff using it as tools for like him being overwhelmed, right? I mean, that's some of the harder stuff. Like the guy coming to fix the pipes isn't really the hard part of being a stay-at-home parent. I don't think. I think it's more the kids part. So yeah, I think that was a missed opportunity. And again, like he doesn't even know what's being fixed in his home. It's almost like his only role was to go to work
Yes.
and not do anything else.
Yes. And like, I think even the lack of like something that felt similar to me is how things are today sometimes of when you're a working parent, there's no transition going from work into the home unless you physically create that time for yourself or give yourself permission to have like a padding, like if you even work in office, you maybe have the car ride home to kind of like wind down. But a lot of people now just work from home that the second you like walk out of your home office, you're like, I'm in it, like And, I thought it was interesting that even for Caroline, the mom character, she gets home from a long day and he's doing bath. And then immediately when she walks in, he like gets up from the bath and he's like, okay, you're in it, tag, you're it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's that's something that I think a lot of parents can relate to today, and especially probably moms, to be honest.
I mean, as the one that is works from home more and is usually a little bit more involved, like I have a little bit more of the Michael Keaton role. I can certainly relate to, like, as soon as my wife gets in, I'm like, well, you're in now, so I do get that. Now, did you find it offensive that she's so used to being a mom that she's just cutting people's food at the office? I was like, give this girl some credit here.
I know. I did think that they kind of dumbed her down in that way. It was just a silly way, I guess, that we were really supposed to like drive it home that we understand she's a
Yeah,
mom
like
and
she's
that
a mom.
she's in this, different world, in
Yeah.
the business world. But
Yeah,
yeah, they
if
did
she
that
sees a
multiple
plate of
times.
food, she's cutting it up. It doesn't matter whose it is. She's just gotta cut up food.
Yeah, that was kind of silly to me. But we have to talk about Chippendales.
Okay, so that was it actually a Chippendales, or that was just like a Chippendales-esque place?
I
I
don't
didn't.
know, actually,
Yeah.
like, I think it was Chippendales-esque, and funny enough, I did fast forward through that part
Oh,
because
you
it
had
was
your
with my
kids.
kids, and
That's right.
so
Okay.
I, like, saw it kinda starting, and I was, like, more overwhelmed being like, "Oh my god, this was, like, a full thing." Like, I only think of Magic Mike as my,
Sure.
like, any reference to, like, what a male, like, review show is like, and that's even the movie, and, like, we could talk about that as a whole separate movie if you would like to someday. But
Oh,
anyways,
yeah.
my point is that I had never even like seen a Chippendales show or like thought of them as like real, to be honest. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
seeing that in the show and again being like, oh my God, this is something that existed in the 80s and that people went to. And like that cracked me up.
Yeah, I mean, my frame of reference was like the SNL skits that they used to do. That was
Yes.
really all I had seen. So, well, I guess to fill you in, if you didn't see that part, it's pretty quick. And I actually want to say that I I was like, given how unfortunate like homophobia was in the 80s and 90s, Michael Keaton was like mostly cool with being there. He wasn't like so disgusted. He even like gave one of the dancers like some money. He didn't want to like look at where he was putting it, but he like actually gave him some money and played along with it. So I thought they handled it well, and he wasn't like so disgusted. But he was obviously pretty taken aback, and he even mentions it to the. I guess one of the women is watching the kids at home, and he's like, "You knew where they were taking me all along."
Right,
Like
right,
they
right.
made it like they were like pranking him, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's meant to almost show like he's one of the girls now, like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that he's a part of their life and their journey and kind of the things they do.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
I
another one. So the girls are playing poker. So all the housewives and stay-at-home moms are like sitting there and playing poker with coupons.
I
And I
know.
love that. I was like, that was
I thought
another
that was
like little
funny. Yeah.
throwback, being like, man, that's actually kind of genius.
Yeah.
But also coupons, like I know that they still exist in life, but even the physical like versions that they were using that you would cut out, and now everything's all electronic and on apps and all that good stuff. But
Well, I'm pretty sure it was like some of them were like 5 cent rebates. It was like
yeah,
stuff that you would obviously not be doing now. I wonder if there was like a little surge of coupon poker after this movie came out. The logistics don't. As someone that's played some poker before, I was trying to think of like the logistics of it, but I think it was it shows better on a movie screen than it would in real
agree,
life at a dinner
agree.
table. Okay, so then we have Caroline. She wows the tuna executive. They fly her to California for the commercial to film it because she used her know how. And again, I think it's a great way of showing like the value that a mother could bring to the workplace. And then we have kind of like the big conflict here comes to a head where Ron hits on Caroline and Joan. I guess so. Then Joan hears about this because Jack's upset, and then Joan kind of comes over to seduce Jack, and he's like debating it for a moment in the mirror. They give him like the penance of who am I kidding? I love my wife, but he does literally ABC all the way through Z of like the pros and cons of doing this. And then Caroline shows up, and the whole thing kind of gets resolved.
Mhm.
Now, again, everybody shows up at the same time. So Caroline comes home. We have the exterminator and the TV repair woman, by the way, which I love to have.
Mhm.
Like she was just like this like slick talking lady who was repairing TVs. And I guess they start doing the negotiation for them, right? Like that's how the movie ends with the exterminator and the TV repair woman negotiating on their behalfs.
Yeah, that one, it was actually kind of confusing to me why they felt the need to like re-involve them, but yeah, then they're negotiating about, the how many days a week they work in home or office, and if there's an extra perk, I don't even remember what it was, like a company car, I think it was, or gas money that they get paid or something.
So Jack wanted a company car and for his two friends to get their jobs back,
Right.
and Caroline wanted to work from home twice a week, which again, way progressive. I feel like it's not working from home's not mentioned again until 2020. So I don't know what happened those 25 years in between, but I'm glad they finally did something about it. Um, so one of the big takeaways also is Jack gets mad at Caroline that she's sort of becoming the executive and he's busy doing all the domestic stuff. At no point does he say, "Hey, like I just realized all this stuff you were doing is hard." Right? Like he never really shows her any empathy for like, "Hey, like you know what? Everything that you were doing was hard all along, and now I see it because I'm doing it." Right?
Yeah, if any, they talk about that. There's a couple scenes. One of them's the Halloween scene right before she goes on that work trip, and he's telling her like, "Hey, like I'm just reminding you, like you don't want to miss the good stuff in life." And so it's like right away, I was like, "Oh man, that parental guilt, like it was there even in the '80s, as it is now." And that's something we all beat ourselves up on, and so, but I had that immediate thought of like, wait a minute, but if you had to do something for your job, like would you have been, like, is she then telling you something in reverse, like, or is she supporting you and understanding that like, hey, you're doing this for the better of our family? And then he's like, of course I want you to succeed, it's really easy to forget what's important, so don't, and again it's like, but she's, she just got this huge account and it's an amazing thing. And I'm not saying like great job on missing out on Halloween, but there is again this balance. I mean, that's the whole point, work life balance, that
Yeah.
we have to be like one place or the other. And I think that's something that adding that level of guilt to your partner is just not helpful. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, let them either be all in on that flight and that work meeting the next day and like kick ass and get on the earliest flight back, or they reschedule that meeting and they stay home for Halloween. Like, but there's no like in between zone. And
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
we live there too much as partners sometimes.
yeah. I mean, we have to assume that for at least 5 years he's just working. He's not buying any groceries or taking care of the house in any way. And then he has the audacity to, after like a few months, I don't even know how long it's been. It's been like maybe 3 months. He's like, "Hey, like you're missing a lot of the good stuff here." I just thought that was like really, insensitive, and he didn't really say like, "Hey, I realize I probably was doing this to you too, and I
Right.
appreciate everything you did for
Oh, and
me."
then there's the other scene where he talks to her about how hard it is. He does say, I don't know if he ever acknowledges like this was so hard. Oh my gosh, what you did was so incredible. But he's kind of acknowledging he's resentful. Oh, it's when he's over. Yeah. It's when he grows out his beard. He has the flannel shirt on. He's like, just not looking well. He's not taking care of himself. The house is a mess. And she more yells at him being like, what's wrong with you? Like, take pride in our home, take pride in our kids and our house, and just the way we live our lives, and really the job of being a parent,
Yeah,
and I love that she's like, of course there were times where it was, remedial work, or like that it was boring or that it was hard, but like I did it because I had pride in our house and our family.
right.
And that kind of wakes him up a little bit. And eventually is part of the movie story arc where he then transitions to start caring a little bit more and being involved in the drop off. He's directing traffic instead of just being the guy going the wrong way. But I liked that too. It's a mindset, for a lot of people, of not getting stuck in these roles, but just being a part of the team of like, I'm here because we're all driving in the same direction. And so I appreciated that little monologue on her part.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's almost positing that you can't you can't be dedicated to your career and know anything about what's going on at home, right? Like they don't give the mom basically does what the dad was doing. So I feel like it's almost saying like, hey, it's imagine if you have to do both, right? As most of us do, right? Most people are involved in the house stuff and they work, and it's like that. This movie suggesting that's not even something that you could do.
Yeah, no, if anything, truly, they need to make Mr. Mom 2, the sequel to it in today's world, because like I alluded to, like at the very end, they're now both going to be full-time working successful parents.
Yeah,
it's like, then what happens? And so I think that gets us to today's world, which is like, no, you do need to hire help. You need, you need to have a nanny or, a mother's helper or a family assistant or like, some type of help if you guys are going to be gone at work, because yes, you're still going to have to do a lot when you get home. It's not like, you're off the clock and don't have to parent or don't have to be involved in any way in the house, but like, what's your game plan,
Yeah.
and really seeing how that, like, I think that would be, I don't know if it'd be a Mr. Mom would be even the right title anymore, but I think that would be a movie that would be more interesting to see, like, what's the real life version of that today.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my questions for you was what happens next for them in their careers. I guess we're to believe that they become a dual income house. They're probably doing pretty well for themselves. They have a second income now. They're both working and I guess they're both taking care of the kids. The Mr. Mom 2, I guess, would be less funny and more just like a documentary of the average life of a suburban house.
I know it really would. It would not be funny at all.
Yeah. No, yeah. The premise of this movie is that how funny would it be if a dad was a stay-at-home person?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I mean, it starts leaning into like the conversations I'm having at Peacock Parent, honestly, about, if time is the most valuable thing, and again, going back to like, Jack telling his wife, like, be here and, like, don't miss out on these good times. But then if that is, once you're both working to, actively working, dual income, then you do have to kind of make a decision of investing in your own time and your own joy. And that's a lot of what I spend time with. And we don't need to talk about that anymore. But I think it is interesting because that's the conversation, in the 21st century about like where we all are for the most part, as far as dual income working families.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question I had was what would this movie look like if it was made today? It would have to be like because it couldn't just be the opposite where it's like somebody's a stay at home and somebody's not. It's like I don't know what they both like. They're both stay at home and they're both like in the gig economy. They're both like driving Ubers. Like well, I'm trying to think like what the premise would be.
I don't even know. I mean, like, funny enough, it's almost like, oh, it's COVID, like, and they're both forced to stay at home and also homeschool and work. And like, but it's like, again, that's almost like this horror movie. It's not even a comedy anymore because everyone experienced it. Um, I really don't have a good answer for that as far as what today's version is. That's again, that's funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that they've started to do that. Like they had like that movie with Vin Diesel where he's not like a typical dad. He's like he's like a military guy, right? It's almost like it's not funny that just for a regular dad to be home anymore. So it'd have to be like a superhero type guy or somebody who's just not used to being around kids, and then they're home with the kid.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way to do it because it's not that interesting anymore that like one person works from home and one person doesn't or vice versa.
Yeah. Which I think
Uh,
is a good thing.
I agree. Yeah, I think yeah, the movie just wouldn't be interesting today. It'd be like just watching themselves on TV. Um, Jack's parenting style. I felt like again there wasn't a lot to dig into because the kids were kind of just like props, but he's really hands off. I feel like one of his major achievements was making his 3-year-old not use a blanket anymore. I feel like that wasn't really even that impressive, and he's mostly letting them kind of govern their own lives. He's using the iron to grill cheese them. I don't know any observations about the way he parents.
I mean, none. I mean, it was very, no discipline, very trusting. I mean, I guess that was a little bit of the 80s kind of coming back at you, was like maybe a little less fearful than we
Yeah,
are today as parents, just like not assuming something will go wrong, almost being surprised that something did go wrong versus, I don't know, nowadays it's like we'd have baby gates up and like we wouldn't leave them somewhere. We wouldn't leave the room even to go like, poop in the bathroom ourselves if that meant they were still eating like a snack in the other room because they could choke. I mean, it's just there's
yeah,
so much more, I think, awareness of what could go wrong. And maybe that's, there's something kind of joyful about, pretending to be in Jack's shoes of just, hanging out and kind of knowing that, oh, they'll take care of themselves. Like even when he's in his lowest and he's ironing or attempting to iron but also starting to get in his soap operas, and they're really going deep into showing he's this, stay at home um persona. But the iron that was on and super hot and steaming and then the kid walks up, like I actually got anxious because I
Oh,
was like,
you
oh my
did.
God, is that going to fall on the kid? Like, or is he to like accidentally pick it up? And like,
Yeah.
I thought the kid would get hurt. And I think that just shows how different the mentality we are as parents today and all the things that are on our mind.
Yeah. Yeah. He rarely had tabs on his kids, and I think that is indicative of the times. Again, a movie today would be like the kids would be in sight at all times with the parents, and the baby would be attached at the hip the whole time. You don't have those little walkers anymore. Do you know what I'm talking about? That walker where the baby could just like freely roam the house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think nowadays, like our version of that is like they have the ones that are like stay in one place with no wheels where they could be put in, or
Yeah, yeah, they
everyone has
have
baby
like
carriers now, like
everyone
everyone
has
just
baby
keeps the
carriers.
baby against them and they take them everywhere. And
Yeah, but
um,
the idea that a baby used to be able to just like roam the house like in a gerbil ball before they were actually like able to walk on their own is pretty
yeah.
funny, and I get why it's not allowed anymore. Makes sense.
Even something I just thought of that I actually appreciate is the movie didn't dive into any I guess internal battle or conversation of whether the mom should go back to work or not because she still had a baby at home. And I'm
Hmm.
not even sure like 9 months was the baby, like I don't know, but it's like I think that's something nowadays that women really struggle with, as far as whether it's okay to go back to work or sometimes they feel like they have to go back to work. And again, all those conversations about parental leave and how much time, whether it's paid or unpaid, that's a whole separate conversation. But I'm more really talking about that, the shoulds of it. And, oh, am I going to the guilt? Like, am I going to miss out on something? Or should I be staying home? Should I quit my job? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And we're really caught in those, I think, feelings and conversations.
Yeah,
Whereas I actually appreciated that that wasn't even like a conversation or something they chose to focus on in that movie. It was
yeah,
just, oh, she got the job, so great.
yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, there was no remorse, or there was no guilt about like not being around the baby anymore. I mean, that baby. I don't think she was 9 months, but she wasn't that old. I remember there was a scene where he was trying to potty train her, and I was like, "This baby can't be potty trained
Oh my
yet."
god, I thought the same thing. I was so confused by that too.
Yeah,
I was like, man, like that's a big head start there. Like
yeah. I mean, at most she's like 15 months. I would say, Um, all right. If you had to pick, would you rather be in Jack's shoes or Caroline's shoes?
at what stage in the movie? Like,
In the
I
middle.
mean,
In the middle.
ugh. Um, so I mean, Caroline, I think I'd still choose Caroline. I think my first truthful instinct was Jack. As far as the beginning of the movie, it felt like he just has it on easy street. Like he's literally just getting taken care of. I mean, he's living in a hotel, it feels like, where he gets to visit, these children and still feel good about himself as a dad, but then not really have to do anything. And he gets to go to work and still have these like, use his brain, have intellectual conversation, inspire others about rocky conversations. And I don't know, and have a home cooked meal. So it's like there's part of me it's like, wow, that kind of sounds pretty awesome. But the like I guess mother in me is like, yeah, but you weren't it didn't seem like he had a really close relationship with his kids or that he was really involved or like getting any of the joy of seeing them work through, life and problem solving skills and just all those things that parenting is about. And so I think I'd have to say Caroline at the end of the day that like I'd rather be kind of back at work, feel like a powerhouse still and have my 2 days a week that she gets to work from home and 3 days to go in the office. So I think it's like where she left and where I think most of us are today is where the most ideal situation is.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, I think that, and I used to want to be a stay at home dad, and then it's actually pretty hard. I think it's like and this movie does like I think a decent job of actually showing that it's not just like chilling at home. And so if I'd rather not choose, I think like you, like I think the hybrid model would be ideal, but I I would probably choose Caroline over Jack. I think like going to work every day if I had to choose, because especially with three kids, I mean that's an exhausting task.
Oh, I mean, so I was technically a stay-at-home mom for, 3 years, because I sold my company, got pregnant, had my oldest, who's now 5, and then I didn't found Peacock Parent until a year ago. And so I had this lane of time like that I was technically stay at home, but I think I never quite considered myself a stay at home mom. The truth is because I did still have hired support. Like I had a nanny still that would come. Um, I had a night nurse for that matter. I had a newborn care specialist that provided hands-on training. So I never felt like I think I had to manage everything completely on my own, or that I was in this situation where like my husband was the sole breadwinner. I guess technically from a paycheck perspective, that was true, but I felt like I'd still contributed to our family, and like, that I guess even technically the dividends I was contributing to. So it felt different, I guess,
Yeah.
than this model of like what you would consider a stay-at-home mom. I didn't feel limited in my scope. And I think the only thing I would add as far as what they did not, I think, do well of representing what stay-at-home motherhood or stay-at-home fatherhood is, besides all the management of, and the work of maintaining the home and all the kids and everything, but also it's a little boring, like they don't talk about the fact that there's no other adult to hang out with. So like you're literally hanging out with, especially a brand new mom or like father, it's like it's a baby who doesn't talk to you, that's just a blob. And
Yeah.
like there's so much time that there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really missing for like a lot of these stay-at-home moms and fathers. It's like there's that you need like a friend, like you need someone that like you can hang out with. It's almost why working and having like somewhere to go where you can talk to people and have adult conversation is so thrilling. And I get why in reality in the movie they have these poker nights and they're going to Chippendales. It's like you need kind of this fan club together, this like group that you can have a relationship outside of just kids.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this because I've done a few like solo weekends recently when my wife was out of town. It's like hard and boring, which is like the worst combo. It's like not particularly stimulating, so it's not like a fun challenge to solve. And it's like boring, but it is hard. You can't just kick your feet back and hang out. So it's tough. So shout out to all the stay at home moms out there. It's not, or dads. It's not easy.
Mm-mm.
All right, what do you think has aged poorly in this movie? The
Oh,
tiny TVs. We didn't really talk about that, but there was like he was watching like the tiny kitchen TV, which was like a little square.
oh my God, I
Uh,
had one of those growing up
yeah,
in our
yeah,
kitchen,
yeah. I remember those.
legitimately.
Yeah.
And
The soap opera. I think even just the concept of soap operas. I don't know if are they still a thing.
no, I mean, I don't think so. Although I had a rule for myself when I stopped working. I was like, okay, I'm not going to ever watch daytime TV because I
Hmm.
already wasn't like some enormous. I'm a movie fan and I'm like prestige HBO type of like style TV shows, but like
Yeah.
I'm not. I never was like a TV. I just knew I was like, I cannot get hooked. Like I'm not a reality TV kind of person because I think that's our version of soap operas actually now is reality TV.
Yeah.
Like the
Agreed.
Vanderpump Rules and all that stuff. Like I have a ton of friends that are like obsessed with that and
Yeah. True.
that literally becomes a thing that like gets talked about at like a dinner table conversation.
Yeah. Totally.
um, but yeah, other things that didn't age well.
The single corded phone in the
Yeah,
house.
the
Like he
phone.
unplugs that phone and then there's no other way to reach him.
Yeah, yeah, no cell phone. And oddly, it didn't seem like a big deal that there wasn't a cell phone in that movie. And never once did I think to myself, like, oh, wait, but how are they going to get in touch? Or like, how is he going
Yeah.
to get XYZ done without his phone?
Yeah.
That was kind of weird.
It's hard to believe that they didn't have phones, but I'm sure they're also obviously they're superfluous because we did it for a long time without them.
Yeah.
And then again, the baby walkers, Sig's in the office. Anything else on your list?
I mean, this doesn't feel like a material object necessarily, but like the kiss at the door, like just going back to the things that you grow up on seeing and think are more normal as far as, again, a kid that's watching this movie and thinking like marriage, that's what it is. Like every day before you leave for work, like the dad leaves with his briefcase and the mom gives him a kiss at the doorway and
Mm-hmm.
he's off. And like, I don't know, little things like that, I don't think in a good way are shown in movies today as often because it's
Yeah.
not totally real. And I'm not saying someone doesn't give like a quick peck on the cheek or someone doesn't say like love you bye. Like I'm not saying it's like so cold and frigid like in my household, but it's just I don't know, those kind of leave it to beaver style hellos and goodbyes are like, perfectly everything's perfect kind of stay-at-home mom kind of trope. I think his that's old. That's like
Yeah.
not, that's dated.
Yeah. And of course, sexual harassment in the workplace, going undisciplined, definitely
Yeah.
aged poorly. I think what aged well was again this concept of working from home, like so super progressive and ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting to see like times are kind of tough with the economy and like how our families coping with it. Companies are trying to cater to it. Like, I think it was interesting to see that. Not that I guess aged well, but it's it's sort of a timeless cycle that happens.
Yeah, I mean, even the advertising, the pitch she gives to this tuna company is for the owner to outright say, "We're cutting our prices by 50 cents, until you guys feel more comfortable and, the economy's back, then we'll raise our prices, but we're here with you and still until we do." And so something like that, honestly, like if someone works for advertising is listening to this, that's a great message that could go a long way in today, like
Yeah.
as far as where we're headed. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts on this movie. Would you recommend it? Oh, closing thoughts.
For sure. I think it's still really fun. I had a good time watching it. My kids, again, my 3-year-old went to bed because we took a break for dinner and then came back, but she didn't see the whole thing. But I don't know, my 5-year-old, like, he still thought it was funny at times. And I think if you love Michael Keaton, then like it's always gonna be a yes. Um, Fun fact is I did look up on IMDb that Michael Keaton said no to Splash in order to do this
Oh,
movie. So he was the first pick for Tom Hanks in
interesting.
reality, which is
Wow.
so crazy to me because I cannot imagine anyone else except Tom Hanks playing the guy in Splash.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I think it is. I still think it's a fun movie and it can spark a lot of good conversation, but it is seriously dated to the point where, like I said, it's not really representing the entire aspect of the logistics or the real life of the household management and the needs of the today's world. But
Yeah. It's almost better to show kids than people our age because it's like, hey, just so you know, this is like kind of what it used to be like or what people thought, what the stereotype was back then. It's like a
yeah,
really interesting time capsule.
yeah. And then
Um,
ironically, like my husband, I told you in the beginning, he explained to my 5-year-old about like, daddies didn't used to be as involved. And then like no planning on this. It just happens to be on Sundays that he likes to cook. And that's his one night a week that he chooses to pick out the recipe. And like we went to the grocery store as a family because it was again 10 items or less. He was making Chicago dogs, ironically, and some like baked fries. But like he was in the kitchen while we were watching the movie, kind of in and out, like doing some shopping and prepping and like so I thought there was something completely ironic about the fact that I'm watching a movie about a dad who doesn't know how to do anything. And then I have, my husband and dad to my kids that's, knows how to make something in the kitchen and knows how to go to a grocery store. And there
yeah.
was something wonderful about that.
Yeah. I love it. All right, Christine. Well, this has been great. Where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you? Anything that you'd like to share or promote?
Yeah, Instagram, if you're on there, follow us at Peacock Parent. And if you want to have, access any of our parenting resources, we're all about, again, delegation, time management tips, just ways for you to buy back your time and figure out how to do that. So you can go to our website, peacockparent.com.
All right. I will link to all that in the show notes. Christine Landis, everybody. Christine, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.